is up, guys? It's Riley the Wolf, and it's been a while since I've actually done an investigating the Walten Files video. As you can probably tell by the fact that you're watching this video in general, or if you actually watch the Walten Files on your own, which I suggest you do before watching any of my videos talking about them, the next episode of Walten Files has come out. I just want to say, after seeing this episode, I loved it. As usual, it answers questions that previous episodes bring up, while also making new questions for future episodes to answer, and I absolutely love that. The episode, which is titled Cyberfun Tech, essentially gives more details on a few of the stories told in Bunny Farm, and is centered around the car accident and a few of the events that follow it. Now, before I start, let me just give a small warning. I haven't watched Walten Files in a good while, and I ended up deleting all of my scripts for my other reviews of the series. So I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance if I forget about a detail that gets referenced in this episode of a past episode. Hell, whenever I first watched it, I made the genius observation that this episode seems to be from the POV of somebody watching tapes. And then soon remembered that that's exactly what this series is. But anyways, my goldfish-esque memory aside, let's go ahead and dive into... The video starts with a black screen before a Pennywise balloon floats down from the top of the screen. A little bit afterwards, it's followed by other balloons, which serves as a transition into a scene of the school the night Felix Tokyo drifted his way into a double manslaughter charge. We know this is that night due to the banner in the HA! Could y'all not have just emerged from the darkness in a less creepy way? Anyways, we see the two kids walk up to Felix, much like how it was told in Bunny Farm through the game, so they can leave to go home. Well, I mean, not that I want to say spoiler alert, but... After they find Felix slumped over at the bar, the scene fades to white and we're shown what looks like an empty farm. However, I'm not sure if it's a bunny farm since somebody set the fog machine here to the Silent Hill setting. The scene then cuts to black before music begins to play, and the Bunny Smiles Inc. and Cyberfun Tech Company logos fade in onto the screen, and Bond hits the nastiest dance moves ever known to mankind. However, just like the rest of these Walten Files episodes, the good times are never here to stay. Yay. Of course, though, that's only a brief interruption as we're suddenly brought right back into the fun times? Oh, okay, I thought it was gonna be something more sinister, but it's just a DVD menu. The person with the remote selects the top option, and we cut to a still frame of a set of employee notes for Bunny Smiles Incorporated, featuring all of the Bond's Burgers characters on the cover. The first note we see is from Charles Brock, which... honestly, I don't even really know where he is now. He just kind of went missing. Now, I'm going to try to translate the note as best as I can, but some of the words are a bit hard to make out, so if I miss a couple... I don't know, sue me, I guess. Hi, just got hired officially as the computer supervisor for unnamed Bunny Smiles restaurant, though I've been coming up with a few names myself. I've known these guys for a while. They're family. I've done some work for them along with Susan for years now, even before Cyberfun Tech. Getting to know the Waltons and the Krankens has been super fun. So excited to get to work. The future is bright. CB. Yeah, I'm sure nothing bad ever happens to him later on. We fade away from that to a scene of the Bob's Burger stage, and we are treated to a We fade away from that to a scene of the Bond's Burger stage, and are treated to a performance by the members of the Showstoppers. Although maybe Cyberfun Tech probably should have invested in better microphones for them, because the audio's a bit garbled. Each character gets their own part of a song to sing, along with a short AMV of their characters standing in a field of flowers or dancing in the sun. Even Shaw's having a good time. Alright, that was kind of weird, and now I've got goosebumps. Anyways, we get to the main man of the show, Bond, who gets to sing his part. Can you back up, please? Oh, okay, thank you. At least you know something about personal space. Fun fact, by the way, at the time of me writing the script, it was actually the first time I saw this figure shrouded by white at this specific scene. I don't remember how I missed it, But all I remember is that I looked back to see this scary-ass face just staring at me. The footage then cuts to a demonstration footage of Cyberfun Tech's first mech models for the animatronics. We get shown the sign for the Bond's Burger restaurant before Slender Man pops back up on the screen. I do know his name already, but for the sake of spoilers for the people who didn't watch the episode for this video, I'm going to call him other things for now. And also, if you didn't watch the episode before this video, why are you here? Go away. Go watch that video first. Do it. And we cut back to normal footage. The next bit of footage talks about the concept art process for each member of the Showstoppers and how multiple artists came together to come up with their designs. You know, just like in real life. We then cut to an image of Rosemary Walton's picture hanging up on the wall, conveniently slightly over the artwork of Shaw on the wall. Rosemary is revealed to be the lead artist of BSI and approved of the final designs for the Showstoppers.
I think I always had a pretty clear idea of how each character looked like, in my mind. The designs just made sense to me. I wanted to make them seem appealing to a younger audience, while still being simple enough so they can be easy to remember.
We move on to the next section of the footage labeled Animatronics, which I mean, you know, if the title wasn't enough a clue, it talks about the Showstopper animatronics. This section is commentated by Susan Woodings, who reveals that originally, Cyberfun Tech was only contracted by BSI to make the animatronics, which ended up turning into a full-on partnership. What? Which turned into a full-on partnership between the two. We then cut to footage of the models with the animatronic shells slightly on them. The faceplate for Buzu seems to have the name Charles written on it, in a way that gives me a weird feeling that this means something is gonna happen involving that. Well, whatever it is, we then... Hello? Oh, it was the video, okay. We then get an image of a Cyberfun Tech animatronic with Buzu's face on it, as well as a wall of text that seems to be upside down. And it reads... Well, I would read all of it, but a lot of it's hard to read because of this person's pasty-ass skin. Can you back up, please? Basically, the note is from someone named Norman, and is addressed to Felix Kranken. It talks about how several staff members have went missing, one of them being Susan Woodings. Suddenly, we get text near the top that says, Susan has been struggling to... something. Once again, personal space issues. We are then introduced to the CTC, also known as Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's also known as the Cyberfun Tech Console, which is basically a microcomputer in the animatronics that let them walk, interact, and respond to customers, and also recognize specific customers. Is that a good idea? I feel like that's not a good idea. We eventually get to a series of test footage, conducted by Susan and Charles, which test the animatronics' ability to walk around in a creepy sonar-esque sequence.
Alright, everything seems fine so far.
Should the robot be so close to the table?
I don't think... Oh!
Spoke too soon, cliche. We then move on to the next section, which involves testing the facial tracking system. During the startup sequence, Susan and Felix seem to be talking about Felix being missing, which they just chalk up to, oh, he's an alcoholic, so he's probably at a bar somewhere. They also reveal that Jack and Rosemary actually have no idea about Felix's addiction to Fast and Furious, and that no one wants to even tell them. That's awful, I'm not going to put that. They also reveal that Jack and Rosemary Walton actually have no idea about Felix's addiction to alcohol, and that no one wants to even tell him. They start the test and talk about how they had already tested it with Ed and Molly, but are doing a retest since it has trouble recognizing some faces, including Sophie's. The way that the facial tracking works, it kind of reminds me of the first episode of Walten Files where, at the time, I didn't know what the scene even meant. Bond used facial recognition to try and figure out who Brian was before swiftly rearranging his face to something a bit more Picasso-esque. The testing footage ends with Charles mentioning that he felt like he could go for a beer. Careful, Charles, it's a slippery slope. We then fade into an image of a house with a creepy girl standing in the corner. Okay, go away. Thank you. It then suddenly cuts back to the facial recognition test footage, and it seems like Susan and Charles are now talking about the accident.
What does that mean?
That's what I heard, man.
He was drunk while driving the car?
Oh, your voice, alright? The funeral went down some weeks ago.
They didn't tell us?
It was private, Charles. Only the family were there.
Fuck. How's Jack holding up?
Haven't heard of him in a long while. I barely even see him at work.
You don't think Felix's story lied, don't you?
Story? I think it's bullshit.
Both of them seem skeptical of whatever story Felix told them, whether he told them the truth or maybe exaggerated a bit on certain details. For some reason, Felix didn't want Jack and Rose to know where the doll was, so he asked Susan and or Charles to hide it backstage so they wouldn't find it. Both expressed how they no longer want to be involved in the situation before walking out of the backstage room to go check the other rooms of the restaurant. Of course though, a little while after they leave, one of the animatronics begin to move. Well, I mean, if you count Rocket as an animatronic anyway. The doll makes its way to be in front of Buzu, and we see the same two blue squares pop up that had popped up on Charles and Susan's faces during the test before. The only difference this time is that neither of the squares line up with Rocket's face. I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that the facial recognition is being thrown off by the doll's non-human face? I was wrong. I was very wrong. When the facial tracking completes, or fails, according to the text below, it shows the burnt, ghostly faces of Ed and Molly, as is shown over the no faces found text for a brief moment before fading back to black. There is also some audio that's in reverse that... Okay, that was Satan. That when put normally sounds like this. We then cut back to what looks like more sonar-esque test footage from one of the animatronics and, Can I just please stop getting interrupted by strange faces? As you saw, an upside down, most likely haunted face makes its way into Bon and disappears inside of the sprite for it, seemingly possessing it. This looks like it could be the same white figure we've seen flash on the screen a couple of times before. We then cut to live footage of Susan coming in to do a maintenance checkup on the animatronics. And if you've seen Bunny Farm, then I think you know where this is going. This scene shows in a bit more detail on how Bon kills Susan, breaking her neck and brutalizing her face. However, once again, if you've seen Bunny Farm or even any of the Walten Files videos, you'll know that this doesn't kill her immediately. Bon then drags her body to a different spot in the room and begins to make her beautiful. However, instead of seeing his fashionable and exotic makeover technique, we cut to footage of a car driving down the road. The date being May 3rd, 1974 at 12:23 a.m. The driver of said car is a very... well, maybe not pissed off, I'm not really sure, it's kind of a mixed bag, but very clearly distraught and emotional Jack Walten. He arrives at Felix's house and starts pounding on the door, his own voice being heard talking on the voicemail machine from inside the house. It seems like Felix is either not home or maybe trying to act like he's not home. Outside, Jack gets more desperate and angry and continuously demands that Felix comes outside, his tone shifting between sadness, desperation, and anger as he begs for him to open the door. He then moves over to a very familiar window and starts banging on that as well, threatening to kill Felix if he did anything to Ed and Molly. Well, he should probably go ahead and get a supply list started, because as he's being drowned out by static, it shifts to a new scene of Felix in a large hole with Rocket, who is now covered in blood. The static above the hole, which more likely than not represents Felix's state of mind at this point, starts to fade, and we pan out to a wide shot of the 2 graves Felix put Ed and Molly's bodies in, and a third one he buried for himself. He stands up out of the grave and sees Molly's bloodied and ruined backpack sitting next to the graves before the scene shifts to Felix walking through the woods, carrying Rocket, what's most likely Ed's shoe, and Molly's backpack to a river. He tosses both the backpack and the shoe into the river before preparing to do the same to himself. However, just as he's about to jump into the raging river below him, he suddenly stops and drops to his knees next to Rocket, and the scene fades into static. We then cut to an audio log of Felix talking about the events after the accident and how he hasn't slept for weeks due to the guilt. He reveals that he did in fact tell Jack and Rosemary Walten about what had happened that night, and due to the Waltens' reactions, it seems like he actually did tell them the truth, instead of just lying directly to their faces. Well, sort of, I guess. He expresses his guilt and how it's eating him up inside, and says how he had lied about where Rocket was, saying how they must have left the doll at the school, when in reality, it was at his house the whole time. Of course, though, it seems like it's not actually his fault, and the doll apparently just follows him around.
I don't know what to do with the doll. Wherever I go, there it is, and I can't get myself to get rid of it. It's like a constant reminder of this huge mistake, and how there's nothing I can do to make it better.
Surely must just be a coincidence, right? The ghost of Ed and Molly fading into the window behind him? Nah, that's just a quirky little coinky-dink. Later that night, there's a knock at Felix's bedroom door, and the voice of Molly could be heard calling out his name. However, when Felix opens the door, the only thing in the room is Rocket. He then starts to break down as he begs for all of this to end, as the faces of Molly and Ed slowly fade in on screen, and the scene cuts to black. We then cut back to the present day, to the sound of classical music and something else, and Bond is shown to be messing with the Banny animatronic as Rocket sits and watches. After Rocket closes their eyes and opens them to reveal their sudden case of heterochromia, we cut back to the Silent Hill-esque farm where the very distorted voices of Ed and Molly can be heard talking. Whatever this place is, seems to be some kind of quote-unquote purgatory, as we see the soul of Susan Woodings walk out of the fog, her body gray and mangled from her death. Suddenly, someone begins to hum the same song Bond was listening to, before a voice starts explaining to Susan where she is and what is going on.
Don't you worry. You're in safe hands, Susan. Welcome to Wonderland, your new home. Isn't it beautiful? Dead? No. Not yet, at least. Your heart is still beating, but your body is now functionless.
See, that's why I said quote-unquote purgatory earlier, because it seems like Wonderland, as the voice calls it, seems less like a purgatory and more like, well, something else. I'm not really sure if there's a name for it, as she's technically not dead yet, as the voice explains. Susan then asks the voice who he is, and he reveals himself to be the white man we saw flash onto the screen a couple of times, who is named Bond. This basically tells us that the creepy face we see possess Bond's animatronic earlier in the video is the same entity that seems to run Wonderland. Bond tells Susan that he can fix her before handing her a present. She opens it and reveals a purple bunny mask, which symbolizes Banny, and Bond tells her that it's the new her. Susan, for, pretty reasonable reasons, doesn't trust Bond. But of course, by what the entity tells her, she doesn't really have much of a choice here.
You don't have to listen to me. That is up to you.
Bond then apologizes, which, I mean, is he really sorry about it? Because he seems a bit disingenuous about it. Before he morphs into the animatronic version and tells Susan,
You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Suddenly, we cut back to the normal world on a close-up of Banny's face as Susan's eye opens and can be seen from underneath the animatronic's eye. She gives rough and gargled breaths, which was the noise that we heard earlier, as she sees someone or something walk out of the backstage room. We then cut back to Wonderland to see Bond standing, fading into the fog before Ed and Molly's spirits show up and realize that they were too late. As the two of them walk into the fog and fade out of sight, We'll Meet Again begins to play, and the credits begin to roll before the video ends there. Once again, as some questions were answered, even more were brought up. What is Wonderland? Who is Bond? Why is Bond doing this in the first place? I'm sure that all these questions will eventually be answered in future episodes of the Walten Files, but until then, the only thing we have is speculation and our own personal interpretations. And that's why I love this series and appreciate everything that Martin and his team have put into these projects. And I am, of course, very excited for the final 2 episodes of this season. Once again, please, for the love of all that is good in this world, please go watch the original Creations video. I cannot stress this enough. Do not use this video or any other video talking about this episode of the Walten Files as a different source of watching it. These investigation videos are purely my own speculation, and I could 100% miss details that somebody else, or even you, watching the video, might catch that I didn't. I'm not joking. If you didn't watch the original Creation, I'm going to break into your house, eat all of the tuna fish in your cabinet, readjust your seat just enough so that way you're not sure whether I actually adjusted it or maybe it's just your imagination, and I'm going to shave your cat and give it a funny bald spot. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Peace. Don't you know I'm still standing better than I... Oh shit.
Yeah. 24/7, 365, waited too long, now it's my shine. I'm stunning when I'm running in the limelight. You steady running your mouth, cause I rhyme tight. 24/7, 365, waited too long, now